I would introduce myself as a 19-year-old internet activist, which means absolutely nothing. It's a made-up term. I see it as I make these websites based on things happening around the world that, because the internet is so widespread and so accessible, you can make these tools that can help so many people just from a laptop in your bedroom. I've got, let's say, the coronavirus tracking website, which I made with just a laptop, sitting on my bed, watching YouTube videos, figuring out how to cobble it together, post it out there. Now it has hundreds and hundreds of millions of users. That's the power of the internet and internet activism type stuff.
Can you just tell me about what is the process? Like, how did you come up with that idea? Or was it you just saw something post and you just got on it?
There's always something happening around the world. There's even like right now, there's like the monkeypox thing. I was thinking I could make a tracker for that, or like I don't know. Think about a few months ago, there was that whole baby formula shortage. I could totally spin up a
Right.
website that like helps find where it's available or let people share that they have it and sell it. Just got to pay attention. And those are global issues or like big issues. Not like locally, there's also a gazillion things that I have no idea what the local issues of some village in India is, but I'm sure you could use technology in some way to help better that situation. I really feel like it's never been an easier time in the 13 billion year history of the universe to just learn how to do super complicated things. The amount of content that's on YouTube in all languages, and that's just YouTube, for learning how to code or anything is incredible. You can be in the most middle of nowhere place with a Chromebook and figure out how to do the most complicated coding. You can even do coding. You can even learn surgery. I just hope like my doctor isn't learning it, through YouTube. But you can just learn so much and get these jobs paying you hundreds of thousands of dollars overseas. Like, these days, much work is virtual. Like we're virtual here. I don't
Yeah.
need to actually fly over there to California for us to talk. Like
Yeah.
it's pretty incredible.
I'm just gonna walk it back a bit just so people can learn more about you. Where are you from? What's your background?
Sure. I currently live in Washington State around Seattle, but I wouldn't say I've grown up anywhere specifically. I've lived in 5 countries. I was born in LA, but then when I was 2 months old, I moved to London and then Scotland and France and England. I've lived in Israel too a little bit. In the United States, 7 different states.
So for school then, was that middle school, high school experience just swapping around schools around the world?
Mostly elementary school. I'd say I was in a
Yeah.
different elementary school like every year pretty much. Now I guess I'm a college student. I'm also a student at Harvard, I suppose, but I kind of hate like it's not like a lot of people would say Avi Schiffman, Harvard student. I don't really see it as a major part of my personality.
I think we're going to connect to a lot of kids around the world who have a hard time at either middle school or high school where they're sitting around and like my classes are boring or they're not exciting me or I'm excited about
Right.
something. I'm going home and teaching myself. Did you have those experiences? What was your high school, middle school experience?
I had a very interesting time, most specifically probably in high school. I was a terrible student. I had a 1.6 GPA. I actually did drop out of high school halfway through junior year because my projects were just pretty successful. And I was like, why am I just chilling here? I should just get my GED. Everything was going online that time anyways. It was the pandemic. I was the kind of student that I was failing my physics class or I had like C minus in it, but at the same time, I'm winning my school's science fair for a physics-based project. So,
Yeah.
it's not that I was not interested in the subjects. I was very interested in all the subjects, but the way the school system worked didn't apply to me the most. I mean, maybe if I was pumped full of Adderall, sure, I would have done all my homework and all that kind of nonsense. But I think the times in school where I thrived the most was when I had to do project presentations. I'd always go all out for that. I'd always make the most amazing videos or projects. That was the kind of school that I was very good at. But of course, that was not what was traditionally acceptable. But in middle school, I remember, I don't know, we'd have a silent reading time and everyone would be reading and I have like Kindle, or I remember, and I would be reading the Absolute Beginner's Guide to Python Programming. And I had this little thing on my phone where you could write Python programs and compile them. So I'd write text adventure games in the middle of class as like
Yeah.
reading work, I guess. My teacher was fine with it. I was certainly not a traditionally successful student, but whatever. Who cares?
Right. So
Matter anymore.
more about that actually. That's an interesting point. What was one of the first time you got started and realized you could build something?
Think like the most like really successful one, this was before I had my real successful project, was this website I made that was a real precursor to the COVID tracking site. Actually, the COVID site was just the reskin of this one. But I
Yeah.
noticed that in Washington State where I live, all the public high schools, other sports goes through something called Kinko. So like all the football, lacrosse, or
Mhm.
whatever, it all goes to this one website. But their website sucks. It looks like it was made in the early 2000s. I mean, they don't even have a mobile version of it. It's one of those like terrible flash sites, but all the data is there and they updated it every few hours. So I was like, I wanted to learn web scraping at the time because I felt that the best way to learn these new skills was to make entire projects around like key concepts. So I wrote like a web scraper to take all the data from the sports site and designed the UI to look like ESPN, merged them together, and made this sports website for my high school. It was pretty cool looking compared to the terrible website that nobody used. And they liked it so much that my high school put it up on all the TVs there. And I was working with the school for the spring season of sports to make a more advanced version of this and the mobile app that would have live streaming. And like
Oh, that's awesome.
later on in high school is when things maybe started picking up from this is like a fun little game I'm like putting on Game Jolt to like thousands of people are using like a real thing I've
Right.
made. So
Totally. It's like shocking how much you can create an impact in the world. That's for sure.
I think one thing that's cool about
Continue,
like the
please.
internet and tech is you don't really have to do that much. Coding a website, sure, maybe it takes you a few hours or days, but the amount of stuff that can happen from that is so much. It's pretty incredible. That's what I really like about internet activism because I'm not like having to be there on the ground in Europe every day. I can just develop a website that runs while I sleep that does a much broader range of impact than I could do as an individual there.
I think it is so incredible to be able to launch a website and then anyone in the world can access it. Just
It's
publish
also
it.
just really easy to share them too. On social media, you can easily share a link to someone that embeds beautifully, or you can be on the news and speak a domain name that's easy to remember, and someone could pull up their phone and type that URL in.
So let's zoom out a tiny bit. Can you just tell me the story on how did you get to where you are now?
Pretty much, instead of scraping Washington State's sports website, I can just point the same thing to Chinese government health department websites, take their data and just change the background color of the website, change the table headers a little bit, and bam, you have a coronavirus tracking dashboard. I posted it on Reddit and people were like using it and everything. It was great, but I'd say it all really kickstarted when I posted it on Nextdoor, which is a hyperlocal Facebook type of platform. And this was like another month or so later when the first cases started happening in America, which was actually in Washington State, a few miles away from where or like the first cases. So people really started freaking out. All the grocery stores were being looted. So it was like, well, hey, I got this website. Why don't I share it to them? Back in the early days of the pandemic, like there was nothing you could find. The information was so scattered and the
Right.
CDC website was terrible. News articles are mostly outdated by the time you read them anyways. So, I just put my website out there and then people really liked it in my local community. And one person gave a tip to a local tech blogger in Seattle who was writing for a paper called GeekWire. And I remember just sitting in Starbucks, this is pretty cool, and whatever,
Yeah.
responding to the email questions, really didn't think much of it. But that article became really popular, and within 24 hours, I was being pulled out of class to do interviews with the Today Show and the Seattle Times and much bigger publications. And then 24 hours after that, it was in all the international media. And then I think the coronavirus site has pretty much been in every single media outlet in the entire world multiple times over. The amount of attention that site got, I've kind of forgotten about it over the years because it's been a while. But like, man, that website was everywhere, and that was pretty
Yeah.
stressful. A lot of pressure, but I think I learned a lot. This is the one thing you can't really learn this kind of stuff online. You have to learn a lot of this stuff by really doing it. Being up at 3 a.m. with the pressure of literal governments and scientists and all these people using your site as like a main repository for information is pretty stressful. But I learned how to manage that, and now I
Yeah.
feel a lot more confident when working on bigger projects in some ways, like the Ukrainian site.
I think this is a great point too, which I think it illustrates the fact that a lot of what it takes to be an entrepreneur and build something and help people is just wait for opportunity and pounce on it, right? Like you already have this knowledge. I see something new, I can go use it. I think I've seen a lot of it, like recent AI developments, like Dolly 2, and have this other image app and they go grab it and they build something awesome. I think you don't realize how fast you can build something that's really helpful and explodes. So more generally, let's just kind of look back, give advice to your younger self. What was the most valuable skills that you would learn or things that you would recommend?
Yeah, I'd say I wish my younger self completed more of my projects. I view everything I did as a stepping stone. I think that's a good mindset for everyone to have. I have worked on hundreds and hundreds of unfinished projects over my entire life. And the amount of ones I've actually finished and publicly launched is a tiny fraction. But I don't view any of them as wasted time. I view it all as stepping stones where I learn new things and came up with more ideas. Like everything morphed into the next project. Like the same thing with the coronavirus site and the high school site. I view it as entirely a stepping stone. But while it is great and all, I do wish that my stepping stones were maybe a bit more powerful each. By that, I mean I actually finished a lot of the projects, committed to them a bit more instead of instantly jumping to the next idea.
I totally get that. I had that same experience when I was younger. I never finished any projects. I think nowadays I finish all my projects. I think there's some level of just find an idea and make sure you deliver on it and have some determination about finishing it.
I think it's hard because like you can be really motivated at the start. You can be like, wow, this is like the greatest idea ever. But then I'm sure just as well as I do. A week later, if you're still working on that project, I'd be surprised. You just get so distracted with other things. There's just so much stuff out there. It gets hard, but learning how to power through that and sticking with a project will help you long term and also just give you more of a strong portfolio of just cool shit.
Totally. That's actually one thing I would recommend that got me through this is focus on something and getting it to delivery so you can put it in a portfolio or share it with other people. Which is, if it's not finished, you can't share it. And if it's not finished, you can't really put it in your portfolio. So finish it. And then if you want to just quit as soon as you be done, like just quit it, bookmark it, archive it, but at least you finished it and then you can leave forever. I think get to the end and then you can leave is a better perspective. So a more odd question, if you had to restart back to before you ever got started, while you were still learning, like what would you do with the knowledge of where the best path would be now?
I think a big part is making sure you're involved. I mean, this is kind of hard, especially if you're a bit younger, but I feel like you and I, for example, we learn about all the major new technologies pretty fast. We're learning about things like stable diffusion when most people have no idea, let alone like image generation or what AI is. So I think that being in these kind of communities and at the forefront of seeing new technological leaps really will help. I was a bit more isolated, just doing my own thing, middle school, or working on my little video games. Great and all, but if I tried a bit harder to see this is the new technology coming out, and if you're able to develop something with these new things coming out, you'll have a lot more of an interested audience and an easier way to share your products too. For example, with the COVID site, right? It was a very relevant topic that everybody's talking about, so sharing it's very easy. Totally. If I made a project based on AI image generation stuff now, people are going to love that because that's what everyone's talking about. Whereas if I made a website right now on like Lego, sure, that's great and all, and do that if you're passionate about it. Way less of an audience is going to be like, wow, a new Lego website, amazing. So I think that's a great way to frame your projects is just like make something based on the hype. A big recommendation I would give to my younger self or really anyone is just make sure you're involved as much as you can be in technological leaps.
Another question is, can you name experiences, whether it's courses or projects or a conference you went to or hackathon you won, you felt were most important?
I mean, the hackathon I did win in Washington, that was pretty cool just because I felt like we powered through that thing. I remember this was held in the Amazon headquarters building, and there were a few hundred of us there. Everybody went home like that night. It was a 24-hour hackathon, and I remember everyone's working on stuff. And time's up-ish for people to be walking around and really giving you help. Like they're going to bed. We'll see you in the morning to judge your projects. And so most of the groups, or everyone, literally got up and left and went home. But our group stayed there overnight. We went into the room we weren't really allowed to go into. It had a big whiteboard, and we just grinded. We were delirious, but they had free Red Bull there and nobody else was there. So we just drank Red Bulls and I think we went absolutely insane. I remember in the morning, 10 a.m., people start coming back in, bringing donuts, like, oh, you guys are still here. And then we presented our projects, half asleep, but we won because we had by far the most advanced project. And I'd say that was a pretty cool moment. The other guys are not working as hard as us. And I think it shows you if you actually stick with your projects and give it some real effort, you can see some real benefit from it.
Those moments are pretty magical. Just the experience of having a project you really care about and you're working with a team and you're just grinding and you have an idea and it's just so much work and you're going to stay up all night.
Like hackathons, especially in college, it's just a great time where you could just be with your friends and be up at 4 a.m. and you're just like deliriously coding the most ridiculous projects. It's very fun. I wish I had more friends that I could just call up at 3 a.m. and be like, yo, this would be a sick idea. Why don't we work on this? Yeah, I love it. Like when I had the idea for the Ukrainian site, I remember I was actually like in my bed, had my pajamas on, all tucked up inside my covers, tweeting nonsense. I was like, someone should make a website that helps connect Ukrainian refugees to potential hosts in neighboring countries. And I was pretty busy working on my own startup at the time. And I was like, somebody else should do it. You know, it'd be a great project. But that tweet started getting a lot of attention and people were like, wow, what a great idea. And I was like, yeah, it is a great idea. I should probably do it then. So I remember like I literally jumped out of bed, like ran to my laptop. It was like midnight or something. And I was at this office. And I just started working on the project and I like did not move from that table for the next 3 days. I was just eating dinner at the like table, just working on it nonstop. And those kind of moments are very motivating and very fun.
You were talking about being at the forefront and learning with new technologies coming out. Where do you get that now? Do you use Twitter or is there a certain news source you look into to stay on the forefront and be in those communities?
I mean, that's part of it too. You got to know what platforms people are really on. I'd probably say Twitter, maybe Discord a little bit. Reddit can be pretty useful. I'd say Twitter is probably the best though, because people are just a lot more raw on there. You can follow individual people. I mean, that's how I know you, for example. There's a lot of in-person events too, I think are pretty good. If you go to hackathons, you'll see what technologies people are using, what people are excited about, and you'll just be in those conversations. I know at least in Seattle, there's a lot of hackathon, meetup type things all the time.
Go meet in person. You're in high school, get your parents to drive you. You might be a bunch of older kids, but that's the whole point, which is like,
I took the bus.
The bus?
I remember. I took the bus, the good old metro bus, bumming around the whole city, just good times going to those hackathons. But one other thing I would recommend somewhat is I follow a lot of accounts that give me like a Bloomberg terminal for news just free on platforms like Twitter. There's a lot of accounts I like the Spectator Index or Insider Paper, and a lot of private accounts I follow that I get news as soon as possible. I really like learning a lot about geopolitics and a lot about the world and feeling that I understand what's happening these days. I like being the first to know about those things because it helps if you want to work on something big. Like, let's say the coronavirus website. I knew about coronavirus in early January of 2020. Nobody didn't even have a name then. Like, it was, my website has a terrible domain of
Yeah.
nCovid2019.live, but that's just because people called it, and it just means novel coronavirus 2019. The term COVID did not exist. I remember
Yeah.
watching the live stream when they were like, "Oh, we're gonna call it COVID," and it was like, I should probably buy the domain for that. And I've sold out within seconds.
The thing you're not mentioning here is that you're watching what's going on in the world and constantly thinking like, can I do anything here? Is there any opportunity? Is there anything I can
Right.
build? Like, yeah,
Yeah,
awareness.
exactly. I think a large part about this too is having the confidence to realize that there is opportunity in everything. And I say you really need confidence for that because a lot of people, they see all these issues going around the world and they're like, man, I can't do anything about that. But I don't think people realize how much you actually can impact the world with such low effort, especially with the internet and technology. Like, the Ukrainian site I made became huge, but I just had the confidence to look at an issue that I honestly don't know that much about. You don't need to be an expert in so many of these fields to realize there's opportunity in them. I think more people should just, instead of doom scrolling all the time, view it as like opportune scrolling or something like that. Like, these are all these issues people are complaining about. What great opportunity for me to go and develop something that could solve some of these issues or give
And
more
it's still working.
information to people.
Yeah. Because also, I think the fact that let's say you build it and it doesn't work, right? Like, you didn't waste that much time. Like, you wasted
It's a
several
stepping
days.
stone.
Yeah, and then also if it does work, and amazing, you actually brought something to the world.
Right.
So try and mess around. I think a
Right.
lot of the startup founders we know, the one kind of general trait we all share is sometimes a lack of humility. And not to say it's a good thing, but generally you understand the fact that all of us have
Right.
very high agency of like, I could do anything, I can build anything, I can learn anything I want, right? And it's like, it doesn't matter if there's a lot of institutional people in the field, I'm just going to break in. And that kind of break in mindset.
Yeah. Another mindset I would maybe have, I think people are almost too focused on trying to develop a startup as like a proper term for what they're working on, but none of the projects I've worked on I considered a startup, nor are they actual startups at all. They are simply just websites or platforms. There's no legal entity behind them or anything like that. You don't need to develop an organization of any sort. You can literally just make a website and toss it out there. You don't need funding or anything like that. Yeah, but yeah.
No, I can't agree with that more. I think the biggest thing, even just don't think about money in the short term if you don't need it. If you're building and you're young, chances are it's not going to be a financially beneficial.
You're a high schooler, you don't need a mega yacht, okay? You can make a few $100 off the project and that would be a good enough success. Like, you don't even need that.
Yeah, screw it and just build. And I think that's the biggest thing is usually your startup project might turn into a company in the future, but you just got to build and try out fast. And I totally agree with that. So what are you working on right now? What's your plan for the future? Anything you're excited about?
Yeah, I mean, I have this one project that I've been a little lacking on motivation of. Basically, in a nutshell, imagine if UkraineTakeShelter was not specific to just Ukrainians and not specific to just housing, but really for anything and for any disaster, and existed prior to these issues unfolding. Imagine if UkraineTakeShelter was already up and running with hundreds of thousands of people on it before the war broke out. Well, I wouldn't have had to grow it as the war happens and get all the media to talk about it weeks and days after the war.
Can you give some context on how the program works?
UkraineTakeShelter is a website where anyone can sign up and say, hey, I can host refugees in this house. As a refugee, you can go on UkraineTakeShelter. It's translated into over a dozen languages, and you can type in where you are, where you're headed, and see thousands and thousands of listings and get in contact with those hosts and get housed. And it really works, like really, really, really well. There's many stories I've seen covered by the news. Well, they'll interview some host family who's like, yeah, I contacted like all three of these refugee agencies around me. None of them even got back to me. I use UkraineTakeShelter. I've got refugees on my doorstep the next morning. Pretty incredible. There was this one story of this family that was in Kharkiv earlier on in the war, which is the second largest city in Ukraine. And the city was currently being besieged by Russian troops. And this family was hiding in their cellar. They're hiding in this damp, dark place. But they were able to use UkraineTakeShelter to find a host that was in France that was able to help them come to France and stay in their extra holiday home on the French countryside. It's beautiful. It's on the beach. It's this amazing place. And 3 days after this family arrives, their house in Ukraine was destroyed by Russian bombs. So it was a pretty cool moment to see, wow, this website is able to do a lot more than just house them. It's also able to really, in a way, save their lives. Back to what I'm working on now, a way more broad version of that. Everyone always wants to help whenever they see a disaster unfolding around the world. But really, all you can do as an individual is donate money to some, stupid nonprofit that's just going to take half of your money for administrative fees anyways, and you don't even know what happens with your money. Or you could sign some useless American petition that doesn't actually do anything. That's pretty much all I can think most people can do. And that kind of sucks. But with Ukraine Take Shelter, it proves the model that people want to help in all kinds of ways. It isn't just monetarily. And a lot of people have houses, but there's also immigration lawyers and they want to contribute their skills pro bono, or maybe they're a mental health support type of person. They want to provide trauma relief to refugees. Having a major network of everyone's like being able to say, this is how I can help. You multiply that around the entire world, and I think it would be really successful too, because like with Ukraine Take Shelter, most of the traffic comes from mobile devices. You just be a refugee on the run, pull up your phone, be like, I can go to this website, I have an internet connection, and it's like a public bulletin you can carry with you in your pocket wherever you go.
Yeah, no, I agree. I love this idea. I've been doing a bunch of volunteering and trying to look for volunteering opportunities. Is like horrible. The process of getting to volunteer is very difficult and very unclear, and people want to help. They just don't know how. And if we increase the efficiency of volunteering by 1%, that has like absurd outsized return.
And this would be significantly more than 1%.
Exactly.
This wouldn't even be that hard to code in the first place as well.
Yeah.
Ukraine Take Shelter is just a database you add things to, delete things from, and have an authentication in front of it. It's not complicated. There's no math required.
Great message for all the kids out there too, which is like, it's not that complicated to create massive impact. Like Ukraine Take Shelter is immensely helpful. And all it is a matching program with an identity layer, and you guys use Stripe.
Yeah, that's just a simple API you can plug in there. I mean, you can figure out how to make a website like Ukraine Take Shelter just by watching videos for a week or two. Like the database does not need to be perfect. Like, we used the initial version of the website, which I think is still running this way. I think we used Firebase, Vercel, and Next.js.
Yeah.
You can just toss that together. Firebase is like the easiest thing. Sure, it's not the most efficient database, but honestly, who cares? Okay, it really
slap together, get it going.
It really doesn't matter. To make a website like Ukraine Take Shelter took us like under 3 days, and most of the time was spent choosing what color blue looked good for the background the most.
Well, also the design was quite good. I think we should also emphasize how important design is.
Thank you very much. Yeah, that's a big thing. I'm very passionate about good user interface design and good user experience flow. That's definitely something you need to keep in mind when developing things. I have to say, people suck at design almost all the time when I see people's websites, and it's so disappointing to me, even government things.
Yeah, that's true. So the greatest message you're saying here is it's not that complicated, but what was actually required was the fact that you had high agency, you were aware of what was going on, you were subscribing to news, and you saw an opportunity, you just took it. As soon as you start learning and watching what's going on, they're going to come to you as you're lying in bed, and you're just going to hear an idea like, oh shit, I can build this, right? And it's about thinking about how can I actually help? The ways you help are not that complicated. It's not this crazy, complicated world. The message we have is that none of us are exceptional. I think some exceptional in many ways that are real, but not exceptional in the big ways of our skills, what we learned. I think none of us specifically great coders.
I'm a terrible coder. Terrible.
Exactly. But it doesn't matter, right? It's about that agency and that search. That's really great. We're going to wrap the conversation here. Let's say young people want to reach out to you and ask you any questions. Do you have any way for them to reach out?
I'd probably say Twitter is the best. If you just like at me on Twitter or DM me, I honestly check that like all the time.
And any last piece of advice or last note?
Oh, yeah. At the end of the day, it's really being a little bit naive and not realizing what's impossible, and just going for it and working on ideas and projects. The more you think about it, the more problems you'll realize you'll run into, or I really can't do this. But honestly, you really just gotta don't think, just do. And it's like a Nike ad here in the day, just do it. Work on the craziest projects you have in mind. I mean, I'd start making like a website that has like your favorite food before you go on trying to make like a refugee matching service. But like, start somewhere simple. Everything you see in the world was made by people just like you that had an idea and were passionate about it. I think once you realize that the world is really made up of just humans doing stuff, and you also are a human doing stuff, and there are so many resources and opportunities available, and this is quite literally the best time in the universe to develop stuff, that should give you the confidence to just throw stuff at the wall and see what sticks. Especially when you're young, if you do literally anything remotely useful, the local news will write about it. You don't need to take all these, I took AP Computer Science. I got a 2 on that test. I failed that class. Who cares? At the same time, I'm giving talks about like computers to like my class. It really doesn't matter. You don't need to worry about these stupid classes. Just work on your own projects and do your own stuff, and you'll be far more successful just doing what you really want to do at the end of the day. I feel like you could write a college essay. If you like really like catching fireflies, you could write a very passionate college essay about that instead of some stupid club, and I'm sure colleges would love to accept you more for something like that. But I have to say also, like, a lot of these projects, is not the reason why I did it at all. Like I dropped out of high school, but doing things like this is like a sure shot way to get yourself into Stanford or Harvard or whatever stupid school you want to get into. Just work on a decent project like this. Now you have a unique extracurricular. The news will probably write about it. Bam. No, it's probably more than most people in your school are doing. And it really does takes like a fraction of the effort it takes to do AP computer science or calculus or any of these ridiculous classes that people take just to hope that it looks good on their little application. When in reality, like what the colleges are looking for are more so people doing projects like this.
The important part is just focus on your actual creativity, your passion, or difference. Build something that nobody's built yet. It's all about breaking mimesis, build something new, build something exciting. Of course, I think you make a good point about the best way to get into these colleges is don't intentionally try really hard to get into these colleges. The best way is kind of going. But whether you are trying to game this into college or just do it because you're interested, I would say that the central theme is don't try to copy other people or just optimize for the metric that everybody else is optimizing on in a direct way. Go figure out your own way.
Copy other people, honestly, a little bit at least. Like, great artists steal in some way.
Oh, no. Completely steal from other people. I'd say in general, though, like, I think the guidance of the group or what everyone else is doing is usually wrong.
Sure, yeah. I think the way I see it is like, you don't need to be the first person to work on something for it to be successful. I'm sure there were other coronavirus trackers out there before I made my own that just weren't really that popular. If you have an idea and you search it up and it looks like someone's already done that, who cares? Just do it better than them.
Exactly. No, I totally agree with that. I want to make sure that people know I'm not discouraging from competition. I'm actually encouraging it. Right. Generally, I think we're going to talk to a lot of people who don't know a single entrepreneur at their high school. You're in the middle of nowhere. A lot of the people in your life are going to be focused on things that are usually around mimesis or copying other people. And just realize that the important thing is go do something interesting. And if what we're talking about isn't what you're interested in, great. Do something different than us. Go find something interesting you like and go build it.
For sure.
Awesome. Well, thanks for talking to me, Avi. It was a great conversation. Happy to have you. Thanks for watching my conversation with Avi Schiffman. You can reach out to talk to Avi on our website, as well as read the step-by-step guide Avi wrote specifically for this episode on how to build these projects. If you're a young builder or want to be sure to check out Colossus. We're building the community and the educational platform for all young self-taught builders around the world. See you next time.